Hello, welcome to Remember the Film, the podcast where we watch a lot of movies in 2020, but not how we usually watch them. I'm Josh Bradley, and I'm joined by my co-hosts, Jeff Grizz Ulrich.
Hello.
And Hugo Panay.
Hello. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to us all, and good riddance 2020
Yeah.
Yeah.
Happy to be here. Happy we're all here.
It's a bit better.
That's all we can really do is hope.
I don't want to set
expectations
too high for 2021 because
it only has to be better.
Yeah, just better.
It should not be hard. It shouldn't be hard.
I feel like we've had this was the worst year ever years for the last 5 years in a row. So let's hope 2021 breaks the streak. I don't know.
The United States
every year's been pretty bad.
United States, it started in 2016.
Yes, I wasn't going to say that, but that's accurate. That's not inaccurate.
Look, so in 2021, we're getting a sequel to the Matrix trilogy. So it's either going to be the end of the world or the best year ever. That's representative of it.
Well, let's not spoil our next podcast, which will be a 2021 movie talk. So let's look to the past at 2020. I saw fewer movies in 2020 than I normally do. And I think that's understandable given I couldn't go to a theater for 4/5 of the year. What about you guys?
I watched more movies in 2020 than in any previous year of my life. But only 3 of them were in theater.
Well, how many of those were 2020 releases? Did you watch more movies released this year than you did in past years also?
No. In fact,
okay.
I'll just pull it up real quick because I have it right here. For 2020, I watched 55 films, shorts, and specials released in 2020. In 2019, I watched 82. So
dang.
Still a lot, though. I mean, still pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, I watched pretty much the same amount of movies that I've seen last year. I usually keep a list on my Letterboxd on how many movies I see that I haven't seen before that year. And yeah, last year was 157 and this year's was 160 something, so it's pretty similar. But what did happen is I ended up watching a lot less of new films, and I think there's 2 reasons. One, first of all, a lot of movies weren't available because Italy, and unfortunately we don't have some of the streaming services, and some movies were still set to release in theaters, but I didn't want to go to theaters because of the pandemic, even if the theaters were open, so they wouldn't go on VOD. Some movies were just delayed in 2021, even though they already came out in the US, that sort of thing. But I think the main reason, for me at least, is that it was harder for me to get excited about a film just because it was new. Because for me, possibly more than half of the enjoyment of seeing a new film is going to see it at the cinema. And if I'm sitting at home and watching a movie on my TV, I just might as well watch one of the hundreds of movies that I have on my watch list anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I definitely wasn't rushing to watch some of the things that debuted on streaming, with very little exception. There was maybe 1 or 2 movies this year that I was kind of on the days till it's going to be dropped on Netflix or Amazon or whatever, and watched it that day. And I think they both are in my top 5, which we'll talk about later. So I won't say what they are yet.
Yeah, for me it was 2 or 3 as well.
Yeah. I think let's see. I'm looking at my list now. I watched about 20 movies that were released in 2020, which is down. Normally I get to at least 35 or so. Way less than Grizz. Grizz sees 60 new releases a year or something crazy like that. But I don't know. I feel like we can all be forgiven for seeing fewer movies. But
and I'll say with Letterboxd, a lot of the stuff that I didn't break it down as much as you guys did because that would require more work. But so a lot of the stuff that's included in Letterboxd for me is also mini series. So Queen's Gambit is on there.
Right.
Tiger King is on there because it is technically a documentary.
The Last Dance.
Yeah, The Last Dance is on there, and so I have stuff like that on there, which does inflate the total entries a little bit. But I did watch.
Yeah.
I went out of my way to watch things that I probably never would have watched this year, just so I could watch some new stuff.
Yeah, I intended to do that, but I never really did. I should have branched out more.
I usually do that because I like going to the cinema. I go out of my way to find movies to see because I like the experience of going. But watching them at home just wasn't as enticing for me.
However, I will say that what I liked about, all the movies, like by necessity, every movie released in 2020 more or less has to be on some kind of streaming platform. Not all, but a lot of the major ones. So whenever I do a year-end list, I usually just like compile all the movies I watched in 2020 and like kind of rank them by how much I like them, and then I just blast those out into the world. And normally I put like where you can watch that movie because a lot of stuff that I've watched that I'm like sharing with friends and family they've never heard of. Right. It's like they have no idea how to watch it. So like I'll put a little column on my spreadsheet of like it's currently streaming on Netflix, it's currently streaming on HBO. And this year, every movie except for one is currently streaming somewhere. So you can watch of the 20 movies I have, all but The Way Back are currently streaming somewhere. So
The Way Back was on HBO Max like a month ago.
I think it actually currently is. Like it wasn't as of when I made my list in December, but I think it is now. So now, if all 20 movies I saw in 2020, you can stream this second, at least in the U.S. I don't know about.
I got to tell you, Josh, even
Italian
before we started doing
services.
this podcast, I looked forward to your spreadsheet every year.
That's great, man. That's really nice to hear.
That's awesome.
Well, that's that. Yeah, that's. Thank you for saying that. That's very sweet.
Because he's right. A lot of movies, went under the radar,
Get lost in the shuffle,
even for me. And so I would look forward to Josh sharing this. It's like, okay, well, if Josh really liked these movies, I know how I will likely feel about these movies.
I'm glad you said that because we're going to be sharing our top threes later in this episode, and my number one is a under the radar movie that I don't think either of you have even seen, and I doubt.
No, I haven't seen it.
It was an underseen movie.
I wanted
so,
to, but
yeah. I don't want to spoil it, but yeah. Okay, so like I said, we're going to get to our favorite movies, but can we talk about some disappointments real quick? I don't want to dwell too much on this, but just like one per person.
Well, okay.
Grizz,
I think Grizz was going to mention two.
Yeah, well, yeah. So let me go ahead and say this real quick because I wanted to talk about this. I mentioned that this was the most movies I'd ever watched in a year. I have 450 letterboxed entries in calendar year 2020. Of those, 73 of them were shorts. So even if you take those out, I watched more than one consecutive month of content.
Wow.
So like if
so if you outed a large Clockwork Orange, taped your eyeballs open in a chair like in Clockwork Orange, you would have been there for a month. Okay, cool.
But yeah, so people, when we look back on 2020, a lot of people are going to have a lot of really negative things to say about it, and deservedly so. But for me, I had so much fun watching movies this year, and it was also just a good year for me, in terms of improving my personal health and all that stuff. So, I'm a silver linings guy. So 2020 is
you took it in stride.
Going to be a great year for me to think about for a long time to come. And going forward this year, I probably won't watch quite as many because it was a lot to deal with, and you get to the point where you're watching so many movies that you're choosing to forego other experiences like TV shows or watching sporting events or playing video games or all these other things that I love. So I'm going to try for more balance this year. But anyway,
balance is good. But also watching 400 movies is also good too. So.
Yeah. But it also kind of makes sense because if you've been locked down for 9 months and, I know, Grizz, you live alone, so what else are you going to do? You're going to watch a bunch of movies.
That's true, yeah.
I do not live alone, so I was able to watch 100 movies this year, and that was good for me. So
yeah,
I also watched a lot of The Bachelor too. So balance, awesome. Like we said,
balance.
Beautiful.
I told my sister-in-law that I had watched 400. At the time, I hadn't hit 450 yet when I was talking to her about it, but I told her how many movies I'd watched, and she said, "Just don't ever get married, because there's no way anyone will allow you to do that."
Your output does go down, but it's good. That's a good thing. Okay, so Grizz, of those hundreds of things and days of content you watched, what's one or two things that disappointed you? By the way, I like to be positive, so I don't want to dwell on these too long. Just like one thing that
Well, whatever. And I think that's why for our disappointments, we're not necessarily saying things that we hated, but things that it happens that I did not like these, but I didn't go in expecting to hate it, or anything like that. So the first one,
I just want to say there are things to recommend.
Yes, yes. So the first one I wanted to talk about was Artemis Fowl, which came out on Disney Plus.
At the beginning of the year.
At the beginning of the year. This movie has the bones of a cool universe, a cool story, and like by all accounts, the books very good that this is based on, and so I was going in expecting a kid friendly, sort of mystery, science fiction, I didn't really know what I was getting into. The movie is about magic and fey creatures and things like that, and so I mean it sounded like something that would be kind of up my alley, and then I came in and it was just bad on all fronts. Even like
much maligned. You weren't alone in feeling that way. It was very maligned.
The reason it's disappointed is because it had a pretty good cast. Like, people who have been very good in other movies,
and a decent,
and like you said, a popular book, and a high budget,
and it just it even the things that it did well, it did well by comparison to how bad everything else was.
Never a good thing.
But yeah, so Artemis Fowl was the first one. That was a disappointment because I actually had high hopes for it. The other one I wanted to touch on was Songbird, which just came out recently. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. This is
Is that a romantic drama thing?
Yeah. About...
Oh, is it the one with Kumail Nanjiani?
No. Songbird is... That's the Lovebirds.
That was Lovebirds.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I did watch that as well. But Songbird is about a pandemic.
Oh, no.
This movie went into production when the pandemic started and finished production during the pandemic. And it's about COVID-23 is the virus.
Oh, no.
And, it had some actors that I like. Demi Moore, Bradley Whitford, who, of course, is from The West Wing, my favorite TV show of all time.
Oh, I know which one you're talking about now. It's one produced by Michael Bay, isn't it?
It is Michael Bay produced, and that is readily apparent.
God. Oh, no.
Yeah, and it's...
Why? Why would you do that?
Well, okay, I was curious what a movie with a budget, because this is Michael Bay's producing it, so it'll have a pretty good budget. I wanted to see what they could do during a pandemic to make a movie with high production value. And it does have high production value, but it's just so tone deaf, and like you can tell like some of the concepts that they broach early on in the show are based on ideas that we had about COVID-19 months ago. So when you watch it, when the movie finally comes out, it's like, this
it already feels old.
This is wrong. It's just preposterous. And
it's interesting though, because sorry to interrupt, but at the beginning of the pandemic, another movie, I don't know if you've seen this movie, Contagion is called?
Contagion.
Contagion. It had a huge resurgence in popularity at the beginning of the pandemic. It was on, I think it was either Netflix or Prime Video.
It was on Netflix.
Who said, oh, this movie, everybody's watching this movie now. So there is something there.
Well, so I think they tried to cash in.
That wasn't made. Contagion wasn't made during a pandemic.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's where the tone deafness of it comes in.
Yeah, again, read the room, guys. And I guess in the filmmakers' slightest defense, it probably went into production before hundreds of thousands of people had died.
Yeah.
And so maybe they thought that we would handle this better, and so that fewer people would die, and then it would come out in a post-pandemic world, maybe.
I'll tell you, after watching this movie, COVID-19 could have been a lot worse, because it could have been like this movie.
I don't want to spend too much time on it. Yeah, that's a rough look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's my and the reason it's a disappointment. I didn't go in expecting to enjoy this movie. I didn't expect it to be good. I'm disappointed that they made the movie.
Yeah,
I agree. Me too.
That makes sense.
I'm not mad. I'm disappointed. Hugo, go.
Yeah. So for me, it was a movie that I went in wanting to love, and it was really possibly the movie I was most excited for this year. Maybe not the most, because Dune was also supposed to come out, but of course it got delayed, and it was the only movie that I got to see in a theater this year. I mean, at least after the pandemic started, and it's Christopher Nolan's new movie Tenet.
Oh wow, hot
take. Well, not really, because if you look at it, because I didn't hate the movie. I think the movie's good. It's fine. It's a very slick, cool action movie with some incredible action sequences. That some of the stuff that they achieve in camera is mind blowing. I don't know how they did it, and the special not the special effect, the practical effect, trickery that they were able to achieve is mind blowing.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
At the same time, it is incredible, and I saw it on a big screen, so it's even bigger. I couldn't hear any of the dialogue, but that's another issue. Yeah. So yes. On the other hand, this is Christopher Nolan I would say this is Christopher Nolan at his most. So what is great about Christopher Nolan is on full display on this, but also what isn't so great about him is also on full display. So the film, all of the dialogue is exposition. There is very little character development. The protagonist is literally called the protagonist because he doesn't have a character. There aren't really character arcs in it. The only character arc that there is off screen because it's Robert Pattinson's character, but because of time travel, it happens before the movie even begins. And
after,
but you don't know, so you don't actually see it. And as cool, as interesting, as weird, as intricate as it was, I just didn't care about a lot of what was happening. And it's, and I thought if this movie was an hour and a half, it would be a work of genius, because the same thing could be said about Dunkirk. Dunkirk is also a movie that there are no character arcs. There's very little dialogue instead of having an overloaded dialogue like in this one.
And it's an hour and 40 minutes long.
It's an hour and 40 minutes long. It's a slick film. Yes. It does what it's meant to do, which is have this really weird, interesting structure, and then you leave. This movie is 2.5 hours. So you've got to make me care about the characters in order for me to enjoy the film for 2.5 hours. I was just tired. At some point, I was sitting there. The first time that I get back to the theatre, I was so excited. And I could feel myself wanting not to be there anymore. I was just tired. And I also think the final action sequence is the weakest in the movie. It's the one that gets really confusing. It's hard to tell what's actually happening. And so it left me with sort of a bad taste in my mouth. So again, good movie.
Few things.
7 out of 10, but it was disappointing because it was the savior of cinema in 2020, and it just wasn't.
Right. Well, the non-savior.
Yeah, it was supposed to be.
I really enjoy Christopher Nolan's movies a lot.
Me too.
However, I haven't seen Tenet, but I'm with you on like everything you said in general there. In that, number one, Dunkirk is one of his best movies because he gets out of his own way.
Yeah.
And number two, I think that he has a problem with third acts, where like the first 2 acts are amazing, the third's like just okay. Like the third act of Inception is I think the weakest section, and like the sequence in The Dark Knight where he's using like the sonar to like fight the bad guys, that's also my least favorite part of The Dark Knight. So like he saves these amazing action sequences, but he usually the best one is very, very rarely in the third act. The big finale is usually kind of a disappointment.
For me, the reason I agree with it being a disappointment, I guess I was before. Obviously, I knew before I watched it that it had disappointed a bunch of people because I didn't watch it until that was the last movie I watched in 2020 was Tenet.
I watched it the day it came out.
But so I knew going in that I was likely to be disappointed, which maybe that helped me a little bit. I ended up giving it. I believe I gave it 4 stars, 8 out of 10. I think the reason that it is a disappointment is because the idea is so lofty for this movie, and you just had hope that if anybody could do this, Christopher Nolan can make this crazy storyline work, and he almost does. And so it's a disappointment.
Yeah, and you get to the ending twist,
well,
and it's like, yeah, that was a twist. But all the questions.
Don't say anything about twists. Yeah. Hey.
He hasn't seen it yet.
I haven't seen this yet. What are you doing?
No, but it's a Christopher Nolan film. It's gonna have twists. It has plenty of twists,
sure.
And they happen, and you're like, oh.
Or maybe it has no twists.
Or maybe it has no twists. But it's that thing where the best Christopher Nolan movies are weird and complicated and have a weird structure, but they anchor it to an emotional reaction that you're supposed to have. And this one sort of doesn't.
Often a dead wife.
It's often a dead wife, unfortunately.
Right. Yes.
But sometimes it does work, You do feel for Cobb. You do feel for Borden and Angier in The Prestige. That's what I didn't have with this. But sorry, I'm rambling about this movie. I'm sorry.
All right, Josh,
No, you're all
what's your disappointment? Because I didn't get yours ahead of time, so I don't actually have a picture for it.
A little movie called Mulan.
Oh, you did mention that.
Mulan.
I'm an
Disney's-
idiot. You did mention that.
No, it's okay. Disney's live action remake of frankly one of their better animated movies, I would say. I rewatched Mulan, the animated movie from what 97-ish.
Yeah.
From the late 90s. I rewatched it in the last couple of years, and like, man, it's really good, and it really holds up, and it's exciting, and it makes me cry, and it's just great. And then the live action remake that they released on Disney Plus earlier this year for a price, by the way. You had to pay your normal $6 a month and also pay an extra $30 on top of it just for the pleasure of watching this, and it's just really not good. Well, I don't want to be that negative, but it's a big disappointment for me. Is I guess what I'll say.
It had some bright spots. Like
it did.
It had
but
some very good action sequences, and then it also had some extremely terrible action sequences.
Yeah. I don't know a ton about editing, but like it's kind of like pornography in the Supreme Court. I know bad editing when I see it, and there's some bad editing in Mulan. My wife watched this with me, and so when I was preparing for this podcast, I asked her what her thoughts on Mulan were, and I will share them now. She said that Mulan was too stoic, and which is I think a good observation. And we lost the key elements of the original, which were the music and the totality of Mulan's relationship with her dad, which, again, I think is very astute. I think that the original is a father-daughter movie, among other things, but the central relationship is Mulan and her dad. And I guess they tried to do that in the remake, but I didn't really feel it at all. I thought it was... I feel like the Mulan remake... first of all, the trailer gave me chills. I was so excited. Amazing trailer, and it was one of my most anticipated movies of the year, and I really did not care for it, so that's why it's a big disappointment. But I felt like this was going to be right in the pocket of, like, capitalizing on 90s nostalgia, which is what Disney's been doing for the last 5 years, basically. That's been their business model. Yep. But also, like, updating childhood properties to be more gritty for adulthood, which has been, like, DC's business model for the last 10 years. And this could have been right in the pocket of that, because Mulan is, apt for a gritty adult reboot.
A war movie.
But exactly. And they kind of did neither. It was just kind of dull and boring, and I didn't care about anybody. And it was like, some of the sets looked really fake, and it looked like it spent a lot of money on it, but also like $10 on it at the same time. I don't know. I just did not care for it, and
also
it
from
sucks.
the trailers,
I really wanted to like it.
From the trailers, the vibe that I had gotten was, they're making a wuxia movie. They're making Crouching Tiger. That's the type of movie they're going for.
Incredible trailer.
Yeah.
Incredible trailer. Such a good trailer.
Yeah, it looked like they were going for that classic Hong Kong action movie set in the old China with flying characters and awesome fights, and it ended up not being that.
I still liked the live action Mulan. Obviously, I differ in opinion on that. I still liked it, but I think it could just be that because of how much I love the original Mulan, that some of that, rang through, for me when it probably shouldn't have. But I ultimately agree. It's kind of just hollow. Like the structure is there of the movie.
Hollow's a good word,
but it's not filled with anything.
To be fair, did any of you really like any of the live action remakes that they're doing?
So I guess I'll say that this is the first live action remake that I've seen. I've not seen any of the others yet.
I have enjoyed all of them. I have not enjoyed any of them more than the original, which leaves me ultimately feeling like they are not worth doing.
Right. Yeah, I watched.
I feel like I need to check out the Jungle Book, because I feel like the Jungle Book might be
that is the one I liked best.
Okay,
that's the one I hear.
I know that's Jon Favreau, and also what's Greener's name? Anyway, River. Okay, let's stop being negative. And or any other thoughts on Mulan or the disappointments?
In the grand scheme of things, even with a reduced number of movies available that came out in 2020, a lot of the ones that did were still pretty good. So we didn't have a lot of disappointments. I mean, I'm sure there were more than we've said here, but the fact that these are the ones that we were most disappointed by should show that they did a pretty good job, all things considered.
Yeah, but
Sure.
really the biggest disappointment was all the movies that I wanted to see that I couldn't because they got delayed or they weren't
a lot
available.
of it will be 2021 movies.
Yeah.
So we'll talk about
Let's
those
hope so.
in another.
So
space.
who's up first with our three?
Well, before we do that, I just want to say, Grizz, at the top, you shouted out a couple miniseries, and I just want to say that in 2020, because we're watching movies differently, the line between movies and TV is blurring more and more by the day, and 2020 kind of really revealed that. So I want to shout out Devs, which aired on FX and is currently streaming on Hulu in the US, and the reason that's like even more in the pocket between movies and TV is it was entirely written and directed by one person, Alex Garland, who did Ex Machina and Annihilation, which are two of the best sci-fi movies of the last 5 years. And Devs is 8 episodes, so really like 6 hours of content, and it's basically a 6-hour Alex Garland movie, and it's as good as any movie I saw this year. And it's a TV show, obviously, because it aired on FX, but like that line is blurring. And Queen's Gambit is another blur of the line, and there's some really good content out there. Chernobyl from a couple years ago is blurring the line, but good stuff.
Yeah, it's a good point.
And I wanted to
good
shout that out.
I haven't watched that yet, but it's been on my radar.
Devs is outstanding.
I've been very excited for Devs, but
it's not available for you.
Is it not out in Italy yet?
It isn't.
Okay.
If you search for it, it is in one of those top 5 miniseries that are awesome, but are not available in Italy. There's websites that do that.
Well,
so, yeah.
As a consolation prize, how about you go first in saying your number 3 movie of the year, or your favorite or top?
My number 3. Okay, I thought it would be cool to shout out some honorable mentions as well.
Sure.
I think we already talked about The Last Dance. Was one of The Last Dance, not a movie, probably my favorite 2020 released thing. I thought it was brilliant on Netflix, and I really, really, really enjoyed that.
Absolutely.
It made me
I'm
watch
also a
live
fan,
television.
Big in Italy.
Yeah,
there you go.
Yeah.
I watched it when it came out.
Well,
every week.
I watched The Bachelor, so
I was waiting for it every week, and I was really excited. And Mandalorian is another thing that I really enjoyed this season. As much as I hadn't enjoyed that, well, I liked the first season, but I didn't love it, and the second season really hooked me, and I'm excited to see what they do next. Also Bill and Ted. Bill and Ted is Bill and Ted Face the Music came out this year. It's really stupid. It's not as good as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but I thought it was refreshing to see a film that was so filled with joy, and I really enjoyed the message because of the year that we've been living through, even if it's cheesy and corny and a little out of time. But I thought it was a spark of joy, and I really enjoyed it. So yeah, shout out to Keanu Reeves. Shout out to Keanu Reeves for still being the best.
And Alex Winter.
And Alex Winter, of course.
With him as always is Garth.
Yes. Who also Alex Winter? Yeah, Alex Winter is sort of he's a weird guy, but let's not talk about Alex Winter. Anyway, my number 3 top 3 movies of the year. Number 3 for me is Palm Springs. Came out. I watched it a few months after it released in the US because it was originally, I think, on Hulu, and then they released it over here as a VOD. It was supposed to go to theaters here, but then theaters were shut, so they made a deal, and they put it on VOD first, and then they released it. And right now it's on Amazon Prime. Great little film. It's a time travel comedy. So obviously it's going to get some comparisons from the past, but I think it has really cool ideas. It uses the same structure.
I think it differentiates itself enough to the older movies that it's referencing. Yeah, for sure.
Yes, and I think the genius idea of the movie is that it's not only one person who's going to the time loop. It's a time loop comedy, but it's not only one person that's going to the loop. It's 2 people, actually 3 people. But the protagonists are 2 people. And one of them is Andy Samberg as Niles. I don't know how you feel about Andy Samberg. I think he is...
I love him.
Really
Brooklyn
funny.
Nine-Nine's one of my favorite shows.
Yeah, Brooklyn Nine-Nine is great. When he's given the right role for him, I think he's just a hilarious guy. He can play the desperate, sad, but really funny, cynical person. He just does it. It's fantastic. And basically, he's been in the loop for an inordinate amount of time. We don't know. He doesn't even remember how long he's been in the loop, and he keeps living this wedding day where he's at this wedding, and he just keeps reliving, and he knows all the stories. He knows all the. He's at the end of the movie. What's the movie with Bill Murray called?
Groundhog Day.
He's Bill Murray at the end of Groundhog Day. He knows all of the people at the wedding. He knows what they're doing, their routine, and all. So he spends his time just being depressed, not doing anything, or messing with the people around him, because he just knows whatever happens, he's gonna get back to the loop. And then
hang on, Josh got his fingers up.
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
I was just gonna say, I think it's good that like Groundhog Day is about the discovery of the time loop and like someone at the beginning of it and like dealing with that. But Palm Springs is about someone who's been in it for presumably thousands of years theoretically, and like is dealing with the reality of it, and that's a very different journey. And
then here comes Christine Milioti, who as I think her character's name Misty, who's the sister of the person who's getting married, the bride, and she gets stuck in the loop with Niles, and so she's the one discovering the loop, and he's been in the loop for so long that he doesn't even care anymore, and she's the one who does everything that she can, and she gets desperate, and she does everything that she can to get out of the loop, while he sort of tells her like, you need to stop, you need to just, this is your life now, there's no moving on, just settle in, let's have fun, and that's it. And then you have the best character in the film, which is played by J.K. Simmons as Roy, who's this other guy who's stuck in the loop.
Don't give away any of the stuff.
I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say anything about Roy, but I'm just saying he's the third guy who's stuck in the loop, and he has a really interesting relationship with Niles, because they both are stuck in the loop, but they don't talk to each other. And he's the most hilarious part of the film. The film is really sweet, and it's also really funny in a really dark, heavy way at times. But I think it's fantastic. It's really funny. It's sweet. It's about people being stuck in depression and how you face it, whether you choose to settle into it or whether you choose to fight it. And it just works. It's really sweet. It's really quick. It's like 90 minutes long, and it's just a lovely watch.
I also had Palm Springs near my top 3, and I believe Josh did as well.
Me too.
Huge fan of this movie. It was excellent.
Me too.
And
yes.
I will say it benefits greatly from Groundhog Day already existing. It doesn't have to waste any time explaining the concept. So if you
plays on it.
If you haven't seen Groundhog Day by some chance, I would recommend watching that before watching Palm Springs. And then another thing I would say with Palm Springs is there's a very awkward scene that kicks off the movie. Muscle through that, and then the rest of the movie is just gold.
Yes. I turned this on. I turned this on with my in-laws, and I forgot about that scene. But you muscle through it. It's fine.
Yeah. That's why I thought I should warn people.
Yes. Good warning. Good warning. Also, like it's hard to quantify. First of all, I love this movie too. It's my number 4 for the year. Also, but my top 3 aren't exactly like romps. So Palm Springs may be my most recommended. Like I recommend this more than anything else on my list, possibly. It's so freaking funny, but also like it's hard to quantify the time and place of a movie's release. Like the fact that this was released a month into quarantine, and it's about like living the same day over and over again and being trapped in your current location being trapped with the people that you're with. It's hard to quantify how that really hit people. At least it hit me in the right way, and really captured the zeitgeist in a way that filmmakers could not have anticipated at all. And
it makes it all the better.
It's remarkable.
There's really, no way they could have seen that coming.
Yes. Yes. And I mean, we've talked about how funny it is and how sweet it is. It's also pretty philosophical.
Mm-hmm. It is, yeah.
Like, it's kind of about the nature of relationships and about, Hugo, you mentioned depression, about this mortal coil. Yeah. Andy Samberg tries to kill himself to get out of the time loop, and just like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day, he can't. Yes, and so he says to Kristen Milotti at one point, we kind of have no choice but to live, so we just kind of have to deal with it. Like that's pretty philosophical about like what life is like on this planet. So, it's really good. I love this movie. It's fantastic.
It's the best comedy of the year, by far.
Easily.
Yes.
Yeah.
Pure comedy, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Grizz, go ahead.
Yeah.
3?
Sure. So my number 3. Hang on, let me go. I have to locate it. Is Onward. the Disney Pixar film. I think that's going to be a little bit of a hot take for a lot of people, especially given
it is
one of the more recent releases from Disney Pixar, which I'm confident we will talk about. But I loved Onward. It's the last movie that I saw in theaters before the pandemic started. So who knows how much more I enjoyed it because of the experience of actually being in theater and all that. But the reason I loved this movie so much, I think, is because you go in expecting the story that they show in the trailer of, the story of these two boys who have 24 hours that their dad can come back from the dead. They live in a fairy tale world. They're what are they, trolls? I forget. There's something like that.
Are they elves? Trolls?
Oh, that's right. They were elves, but they're blue skins.
Yeah, it's basically high fantasy if it progressed to time. If it wasn't medieval, but it was modern day, sort of.
But so that it's a really unique setting in that regard. But the story they're telling is one that I think a lot of people can get into, which was, they have 24 hours to bring their dad back from the great beyond, and they mess it up, and his dad comes back, and it's just the lower half of their dad. Which is a ridiculous concept, and I think that adds a lot of levity to it. But so then the movie's about the two brothers trying to fix this screw up so that they can spend any amount of time with their dad. So you go in expecting the story about their relationship with their father, and there is a lot of that. But really, the crux of the story is about two brothers and their relationship with each other, and that resonated with me because I too have an older brother, and while our relationship does not mirror this one directly by any means, there's enough just inherent brotherhood on this film that it really resonated with me, and I absolutely loved it. And of course, it's Pixar, so it's at its worst, it's still pretty darn good, right?
High floor with Pixar. Yeah.
Did y'all see Onward?
I didn't. I actually didn't, because it came out when the pandemic had already. Italy, as probably all know, was the first country outside of China to be hit by the pandemic, in the West at least, because maybe Korea, but whatever. And so it came out, and we were already, having concerns about leaving the house. We weren't in lockdown yet, but we were already thinking, we shouldn't go to the cinema. So they actually, I think it came out for a day or something, then they delayed it. And then they released it again in the summer, but then in the summer we were still in lockdown, so I didn't think it was safe to go to the cinema. And it hasn't been released on Disney Plus here yet, so I hadn't seen it. But I'm really excited. I love Pixar. I love most of their films, so I'm excited to see it. I just haven't yet.
I watched it pretty early in lockdown, and I really enjoyed it. I didn't. Maybe it was the fantasy element that I didn't connect with. I mean, that's just the set dressing. That's not really the heart of the story or anything. But maybe it's enough set dressing that it kind of got in the way of the story for me, for my personal taste. But I also
wanted more of the fantasy, maybe.
Yeah. I don't know what I wanted, but I mean, to your point, I also have two brothers, and so I love a brother story. This reminded me weirdly of the Two Brothers in Sing Street, which is a movie that came out a few years ago, which is a great movie, but just same vibe. I think the central relationship is great and the central journey is great, but I'm glad you like it, and I definitely recommend it. It just wasn't higher tier Pixar for me.
Oh, and I guess I was going to mention, I forgot to do an honorable mention. Palm Springs, as I said, was near my top 5 as well, or not near my top 3 as well. The other one I wanted to give an honorable mention to is a movie called The Half of It, which is streaming on Netflix. And it is about a young lady who is in high school, and she's kind of a loner, and she lives in a small town, and one of the school jocks needs her help because he's a dummy and can't speak words good. So so he asks her to write letters to the popular girl for him.
See or no?
Yeah, and it's a on the surface level, it's a movie that is not unlike a lot of teen romance dramas and and things like that. But it has a lot of heart, and the characters, there's there's enough that differentiates it that I don't want to spoil. I do highly recommend it, especially if you're just looking for something that is a little lower impact on you. Like it's not a hard hitting drama that you have to invest your heart and soul into. It's but it's really
on the lighter side.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Yeah, sorry. You go ahead, Josh.
So anyway, Josh, your number 3.
My number 3. I guess if we're doing honorable mentions, I'll shout out one thing really quick. I think most of my top 7 is going to be talked about to some extent in our top 3, so I won't mention all of it, but I'll jump down to The Assistant, which is the Kitty Green's movie, which premiered in January. It's currently on Hulu. Have you guys seen The Assistant?
I have not. You did recommend it, so it's.
We
on
don't
my
have
list.
Hulu in Italy.
You don't have Hulu in it. Yeah.
No.
It's just it's a all-in-one-day movie, a day in the life of this young woman who's fresh out of college and working for a high-level movie producer in New York. You never see the guy's face, but it's supposed to be like a Weinstein-esque kind of guy, but it's notably never mentioned whether or not it's him or someone else. And I think that the anonymity is kind of the point where like there's a lot of Harvey Weinsteins in the movie world. That's kind of, I guess, the point. Yeah. And just like what she goes through in the course of a single day working for this guy, and it's really, really good. And I recommend it if you have Hulu and you're in the mood for something that's not quite a fun romp. Give The Assistant a shot. My number 3 for the year. It's actually not my number 3, but my top 5 will be kind of pillaged by you guys in your top 3. So I'm going down to my number 5 for the year,
Fair enough.
is my number 5 for the year is it's called Sound of Metal, and it's made by Amazon, currently on Amazon Prime, at least in the U.S. I'm not sure about Italy.
It is.
Sorry, Hugo.
One that I can see.
Okay, great, cool.
I did notice that.
Sound of Metal is a movie starring Riz Ahmed, who you may recognize from The Night Of on HBO or Star Wars Rogue One. He plays a drummer in a punk metal band, and he loses his hearing. And so he goes to a facility that's actually for deaf addicts, because he's also a recovering addict. And that's kind of it, plot-wise. And it's the sound design is incredible. We are like kind of in his head for a lot of it, so like a lot of the sound is very muffled. Like we are experiencing his deafness as he experiences it, and it's also like there's heavy metal scenes, and then there's scenes of him unable to hear. So the sound design's incredible. It'll probably be Oscar nominated, I'm sure. Riz Ahmed himself will probably also be Oscar nominated. This is a really great lead performance. He's in basically every frame of this movie, and he doesn't talk for a lot of it because he goes deaf. So like a lot of the movie plays out on his face, and he has like these big, expressive puppy dog eyes, and he's amazing in it. And it's pretty stripped down. It's not very flashy. It's almost like documentary-like in its style. I can't remember if there's much music outside of like the scenes where they're actually playing music. And it's great. It's about self-discovery and and self-love and self-acceptance, and also it made me think about an anecdote I heard recently about disability. And if you'll indulge me for like 30 seconds, someone explained that disability has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with the society you live in. So like if suddenly tomorrow everyone got the ability to fly except for me, suddenly everyone can fly and I can't. Mm-hmm. I'm not disabled in that scenario. However, if a month from now, because everyone can fly, they design a building with no elevators, and I have to get to the 11th floor, and there's no elevator because everyone but me can fly, now I'm disabled.
Right.
Yeah.
So disability is not anything to do with me. It's everything to do with society's ability to accommodate me and my needs. And I was just thinking about that a lot as I was watching this movie, because, it is about, these people who are deaf and non-hearing people, and Riz Ahmed learning sign language and all that, and the struggle with that. And it's very interesting to see, these are characters you don't often see on screen. I can't think of many movies with non-hearing people. And
it's
Quiet
Place is the only one that comes to mind.
A Quiet Place. Well, there's a lot going on in A Quiet Place outside of
it's not about that.
So
it's one of the elements.
I hadn't watched The Sound of Metal yet because there were obviously a lot of other movies I was watching, but
Sure.
the reason I was hesitant to watch it was because I'm not a huge fan of the metal music genre. How prevalent is that?
About the first 10 minutes.
So I can muscle through that.
Yeah. There's like, I think the opening scene is them playing a concert, and there's not a ton after that. So if you're hesitant to watch this because you don't like metal,
I just thought
you're
that I
fine.
wouldn't be able to appreciate
It's-
the movie if the metal was a central thing to it.
Mhm.
But so it sounds like something I should go
Right.
give a shot.
Definitely. And, so you bring that up it's also very well put together in that, it makes it clear in the first 15 minutes that, like, Riz Ahmed, I wish I had his character written down because I hate referring to characters by the actor who plays
called,
them, but
Ruben.
Ruben. His character's name is Ruben. It makes clear in the opening that, like, music is kind of all there is in Ruben's life. He's in a band, a 2-person band with his girlfriend, and, like, his girlfriend is, like, what helped get him sober. And so, like, his girlfriend and their band is really all he has in his life. And so losing his hearing is devastating. It threatens his sobriety, it threatens his relationship, it threatens his only way of making money.
Yeah.
So they're really good about making this very high stakes. You really feel it, and you feel for the guy and his big puppy dog eyes. And it's a great movie. Again, I think in a different year, Riz Ahmed would maybe be a frontrunner for Best Actor, but unfortunately, there are other people that are bigger frontrunners this year. But it's really good. It's very subtle. It's, like I said, it's not flashy or ostentatious. It's almost documentary-like. But it's great, and I really recommend it.
All right, Hugo.
Awesome.
Number 2.
So that's going on the watch list.
Hugo,
So number
number
two
two.
is a movie that released early in the year, and it's The Five Bloods by Spike Lee, which I love Spike Lee. Like, just starting off, I think he's a mad genius, and again, this film, in the same way that Christopher Nolan, Tenet was Christopher Nolan at his most, The Five Bloods is Spike Lee at his most. So I think the film, on a thematic level, is as strong as anything Spike has ever made. So I think his best movies are Do the Right Thing and Black Klansman from a few years ago. And they just get to the core of this just rage that he has inside him that he's able to deliver through his art, and this rage about being a black man in America and all the issues that come with that. And he's really good at doing these period pieces that create parallels between the present and the past, in which this movie is half set in the past and half set in the present, but it takes a historical idea, which is how black people were treated during the Vietnam War, how they were sent to war, and how they were kept separate from the white military, the part of the military and all that. And it brings it into a contemporary setting. The basic story is these four black veterans who basically had found some gold while they were fighting in Vietnam in the I think it says it's 69 or either the late 60s, early
Something
70s.
like that. Yeah, that sounds
I think
right.
it says. I think it does say that it's 69, but I'm not entirely sure. And they decide to go back to Vietnam together to look for this gold that they had buried. They basically, their idea was, we found this gold, but they sent us here to die. America, our nation doesn't care about us. They sent us here to die. We're just going to keep this gold, and we're going to bury it, and then we'll come back when we can and get it back. And it cuts back and forth between the story of them in the present looking for the gold and these really, really, really cool sequences shot in 16mm. So they look that they were filmed in the 60s on location of them as young people, although they're played by the same actors, which is sort of a weird artistic choice. It looks a bit odd.
That's a complaint.
It is a bit off-putting. But together with him is Chadwick Boseman, the late great Chadwick Boseman, unfortunately, as Stormin Norman,
Really good in this.
who plays
Very good in
this this character who's sort of he's sort of their Zen guru for them.
He's their leader.
He's their leader, but he's a philosopher. You can tell he's someone who understands the condition of the black man in America and who has ideas on it and a philosophy.
Yeah, and he
behind
educates in the past sequences. You hear him educating them about Black history that they were not taught,
that they weren't aware of, because possibly he was more educated or more interested in it or had more time to learn it. And all those sequences with him are, I think his performance in this is one of the best he's ever given. He's fantastic in it. I know we're going to talk about him more next week, but I do think he would be deserving of a supporting actor nomination for this movie, because I think he's just great. He has this really weird physicality to him in this film, and I just love him. And the main character,
because he's notably not as old as the other characters.
Yeah.
Notably,
very notably.
He is, yes. And that's where I
Yes.
let me say this. Last thing is, Delroy Lindo plays, well, he's not the protagonist because all 4 of these Vietnam vets are protagonists of the film, but he's possibly the character that has the most screen time and whose story is...
He has the most dramatic arc.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and his story is the most dramatic, and it's the one that has more power. I think power to it. He's this character who has PTSD, who basically has given up on life, and he's become sort of a conspiracy theorist. He very notably says he's a Trump voter, despite
Wears a MAGA hat the entire movie.
But
very notably.
But you can tell that a lot of this is because of the trauma of what happened to him all those years ago. Because obviously I won't spoil it, but he's suffering PTSD and all that comes with it. And he has some of the best scenes in the film where he's just monologuing, and either he's having visions, or he's going insane, or he's monologuing to the camera, or he's just having a scene.
Those are really
Every
powerful
scene he's
moments.
in, he's so powerful in it. And this is both what's good about the film and what's bad about the film, because I do think, compared to, for example, I think Black Klansman is my favorite Spike Lee film, and I think that film is so focused and it tells a great story, and then it brings in the themes. It manages to throw in the themes organically within the story of the film. This film oftentimes does feel like it stops and then it talks to the audience, which is very Spike Lee stylistically, but it can be a bit off-putting at times.
It reminded me a little bit of the Big Short in that regard, where they stopped to tell the audience.
It's not as fourth wall breaking,
Right.
but it is fourth wall breaking. But I do think that what I love about it is the fact that Spike, at his age, and he's a man who, he did well in life. I'm sure he's rich. He's living his best life. He's making the movies he wants to make.
Going to basketball
but he still
games.
has this. He's going to basketball games. Not anymore. That's a Hollywood issue. Poor Knicks. Maybe he'll start going to the Nets games. He should. But regardless, but he still has this just rage inside him that he delivers through his art, and I just love that about him.
What were you going to say, Josh?
All of his movies,
So
even the ones that are not as good, are really powerful in that sense.
I also think this movie is really good, but to Hugo's point, I think it's about maybe 20 minutes too long.
It is.
And it would probably be one of the best movies I saw this year if it was a little leaner, and not maybe quite as self-indulgent maybe at times. That said, I agree with Hugo that it's very powerful. Chadwick Boseman's performance is great. However, I think you're underselling Delroy Lindo. Delroy Lindo is the star of this movie. He's a revelation. He's
a genius.
Unbelievable. And even though I think it's maybe a little too long, however, I think that the landmine scene with Delroy Lindo and Jonathan Majors, that's all I'll say. The landmine scene is one of my favorite scenes from any movie in 2020.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And also like the sequences where Delroy Lindo is like talking to the camera and really working through some stuff as he trudges through the jungle alone. Also some of my favorite stuff that I saw in 2020. So even though I don't completely love this movie, there's a whole lot to recommend.
Agreed.
And I definitely recommend people check it out.
My only drawbacks were I don't think it made sense to not cast younger actors to play the younger versions of themselves. I'd be interested to find out why he made that decision, and if one of y'all knows that, I'd love to hear it. But
he's just an idiosyncratic filmmaker. He likes to make daring stylistic choice sometimes, even if it doesn't really help the story.
Yeah,
and
I think that's an artistic choice. Yeah, for sure.
Part of it is,
and the fact that Chadwick Boseman is, not as old as they are is probably the punchline of that stylistic choice, I would think.
Yeah. There is an element.
What do you think, Riz?
There is I do think there's an element of it being there. the idea is that it's their memories of what happened and not necessarily exactly what happened. The fact that it's shot differently, it's implied
so I loved,
that in some ways
loved that they shot it in different film and to make it more
that's fantastic.
Correct for the time. Loved that. But it took me out of it when they did that the actors were still old. So it's like, it felt like a half commitment to shooting the older film.
The older stuff. Yeah.
But yeah, the performances across the board, excellent performances. I don't think there was a weak spot in this cast, which is great. And the other thing was
Renault is in this movie.
Yeah.
Sorry. So
for me,
it's funny.
This movie felt like two movies, and part of that is because it was very long. But like it's two very different stories. I'm not going to get into it, but there's a moment where one story ends and another story begins, and it was really, really great.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I just thought the power of what it is really got to me. Even
it was
even
a
though it,
really
I agree,
poignant
there's
film to
structural
release
issues
this year as well.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely. Definitely.
Grizz, number 2. Is that where we're at?
Yes.
Grizz, number 2?
Yeah.
Okay, so I chose a short film for my number 2. It is called
What a wild card.
If Anything Happens, I Love You is the name of this short. It's 12 minutes. It's on Netflix, so even Hugo can watch it when we're done here.
Yes.
I'm not going to tell you anything about the story because, again, telling any part of the story of a 12-minute short is telling the entire story. But it is an animated short. It is very stylistic, the way it's drawn. I'll tell you this much: there's a couple, and you're watching their relationship, and the couple themselves are not really communicating with each other. They are just going through the motions of their lives. But in the background of them, their shadows are acting out the actual emotions and actual discussions that they're having, and the story goes in a direction I did not expect, and it is super poignant to the world, especially the way America is today, and a lot of concerns that people have to deal with. I don't want to spoil anything about it, so you absolutely need to watch If Anything Happens, I Love You. If it's not going to be nominated for best short, it's a crime.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's hope it is then.
Well, that's a crapshoot every year.
Yeah, but
12 minutes. Yeah, I'll definitely give you 12 minutes of my day later today to give this a shot, for sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Right on cue.
Cool.
Go ahead, Josh.
I like that. I like that pick. I like throwing out a short film that everyone can watch on Netflix.
I was telling Hugo beforehand. I really love shorts, and that's one of my favorite things about Oscar season every year. Is I go to the theater, and Shorts TV has their theatrical release of all of the live action shorts, all of the animated shorts, and the documentary short films. And I love to go there, and over like 3 days they do them back. Eat one each day, or sometimes they do them back to back, and I just watch hours of shorts. Absolutely love doing that because I think short films tell a story that can't be told in other mediums. If you tell the same story of this short in a feature-length film, it will lose something. And the artistry that goes into making a fantastic short film is just so impressive because you're doing so much confined to such a small venue.
Yeah. I really admire economy of storytelling for sure. So yeah, I'll definitely check this out.
And also, please watch
my
what
number
did Jack
2.
do?
That's okay. So I mentioned earlier that my top 6 has kind of been pilfered by you guys. My number 2 for the year is Mank, but we already had an episode on Mank, so I'm not going to discuss Mank here. I'm going to discuss something else. However, I will say that I'm a lot higher on Mank now than I was when we recorded our episode. That's just that's one of the pitfalls of having to discuss a movie that you just watched the previous night on a podcast. I hadn't really developed a full opinion on it yet.
I think you said in our podcast that you intended to watch it again and you thought you might find more in it. And you were right.
Yes. yeah, don't. I went in with my whole David Fincher expectation and like my knowledge of his filmography, and it kind of like muddled the movie for me. And like I watched it again, it's really excellent. Watch Mank, please. Mank is a wonderful, wonderful movie. So because my number 2 is Mank, I'll drop to my number 3, which is I'm Thinking of Ending Things, which is also on Netflix, as is Mank. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is written and directed by Charlie Kaufman. Again, available on Netflix worldwide, I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
and
I've seen it too.
We're running low on time, so I'll try to be brief, but it's difficult to be brief about I'm Thinking of Ending Things, so I'll do the best I can. Number 1, I will see anything Charlie Kaufman makes forever in perpetuity. If you're listening to this, you also should probably see everything Charlie Kaufman ever makes forever in perpetuity. That said, I think this is probably one of his more opaque movies that he's made in many years. It's hard to crack. It's pretty seemingly simple, but actually pretty out there. It's based on the novel by Ian Reid, which I read. Great book. And honestly, it's such a quick read. You can probably read the book in roughly the same amount of time it takes you to watch the movie. Very quick read, very, very enjoyable read. I read it in anticipation for Charlie Kaufman's movie. And
that has very little to do with it, though. Right?
That's debatable, actually. I think you could. It's interesting to read the book as a companion to the movie. And actually, if you could not make heads or tails of the movie, I really recommend reading the book because kind of one informs the other. And like I was able to follow the movie better because I'd read the book. And Grizz, had you read the book?
I have not read the book, not seen the movie yet.
Okay, cool. That's good to know. So the premise of the book and the movie is we are inside a woman's head. It's her narration, and in the movie she's played by Jessie Buckley, and her name is Lucy. Maybe she kind of has different names, which is kind of the point that I'll get to. And she is going with her boyfriend to drive from the city to the country to meet his parents, and she is thinking of ending their relationship. So this exercise of meeting his parents is kind of a pointless thing. She's just going to break up with him soon anyway. Hence the title, I'm Thinking of Ending Things. That's at least the setup of both the book
I
and
thought
the movie.
the title was referencing a suicide.
Well, that's interesting that you say that because it kind of also is referencing a
goodness.
suicide. It's
a
double entendre of the title.
There is nothing in the film that isn't ambiguous, that can't have multiple meanings.
Correct.
Interesting.
Yes. So if you're watching the movie carefully, you will tell right away that something is amiss, and it's more than what the premise is promising you. There are visual cues that like things change and then change back, and if you paying attention, like a lot of its dialogue, like probably like 40 minutes of this movie is just Jesse Buckley and Jesse Plemons, who plays her boyfriend Jake. Jesse Buckley and Jesse Plemons just sitting in a car talking. That's like half the movie basically. And if you're paying attention to the dialogue, some things they're saying like kind of don't add up, and like things they say about themselves and about their past, like it changes in an odd way. And again, if you've read the book, you kind of know where this is going, and you know what the explanation is. I will say that. Oh, also, the movie cuts back frequently to this janitor who works at a high school, and he doesn't say anything. He lives alone. He just kind of lives a sad, lonely existence, and it's not clear until the very end what that janitor has to do with Lucy and Jake going to see Jake's parents. But eventually you kind of get an idea. I think that the book is way more clear on how this all ties together, and the movie is a lot more ambiguous. What do you think, Hugo? Yes?
Yeah, I have to be honest, I didn't really like this movie. I watched it like a week ago. I think there's elements of it that are just absolutely genius. The way they, as you were saying, the way they change, things change, but the movie doesn't point it out. I think that's brilliant.
It's very subtle. You have to watch carefully.
Performances are great. I think what the movie is trying to say and what the story actually ends up being is great. But I found it to be incredibly self-indulgent. It's 2 hours and 15 minutes.
20 minutes, 15 minutes, something like that. Yeah.
And I think the same story could have been told in 30. and it would have been an amazing short film.
Yeah, like I said, you can read the book. You can read the book in about the same amount of time it takes you to watch the movie.
Yeah, and you can tell.
Again, I recommend both. I think that you said that the themes. I think that Charlie Kaufman. There are a few people who can make movies better than him that are thought provoking while also being emotionally resonant.
Yeah. While
also being like wryly funny, but also super depressing, but also somewhat uplifting. Maybe I don't really know. Again, but this is his most probably surreal movie, which is really saying something given the movies he's made.
I think that. Sorry,
go ahead.
If I interrupt again. With Charlie Kaufman, my thing is, this is not my thought. I have to credit Mark Kermode. I don't know if you know him. He's a British film critic. Who reviewing this film and also I think he said the same when he was reviewing Synecdoche or whatever the pronunciation of it in New York.
Schenectady.
Was that Synecdoche, whatever it was. But that Charlie Kaufman is at his best when his writing and his story and his genius ideas of storytelling are being mediated through another director. And I tend to agree with that. I think the best stuff by Charlie Kaufman is the stuff that he wrote but he didn't direct. Personally, at least. Because I do think he gets... I think it's quite difficult for him to get out of his own head. Not out of his own
He's written movies that literally take place inside people's heads. Multiple movies that take place literally inside people's heads. I'm actually in the Roger Ebert camp. Roger Ebert called Synecdoche, New York the best movie of the 2000s, and it was in his top 10 for the best movies ever made for a spell. And I don't know if I'm that high on it, but Synecdoche, New York is nearly a life-changing movie for me, just based on when I saw it and what that movie is. So that's a different conversation. Yeah. I think that I'm Thinking of Ending Things is... It has an awful lot to say about relationships, but also about loneliness and solitude and regret and looking back at your life. Grizz, you said that the title you thought was about suicide. It kind of is.
Or it could be.
Again, that's the through line is more clear in the book. It's less. It's more ambiguous in the movie.
But it sounds like you like that ambiguity.
I do. Definitely. I think again, you have to watch carefully, and you can. I think you get out of the movie what you are willing to get out of the movie, and what you know.
Interesting.
The book is more overt horror, and the movie is not really horror at all. The third act of both the book and the movie take place at a high school, and it's like pants-shittingly scary in the book, and it's kind of like whimsical and something else in the movie. But yeah, I think. If you're willing to take this movie on its own terms, I think it's really great. And
I have seen that this movie is being referenced in a lot of lists for potential Oscar nominations. Do you think
that would actually kind of surprise me? Maybe for Jessie Buckley as the lead woman.
I was going to say.
Also, Jake's parents are played by Toni Collette and David DeLewis in some just
amazing
bananas performances. They
so good.
Just are both really going for it, and a lot is asked of them. And they really deliver.
Some of the articles I found, this one was usually listed in honorable mentions. So, that means like one of those ones that they think is on the cusp of being in that category. So, who knows? Maybe it will be. Okay, let's do.
The parents are brilliant. The parents are basically Eraserhead's parents. If you've seen that movie, and it's great.
Let's do Hugo's number one.
My number one is the other Pixar movie that released this year, Soul. Just came out. I think it came out on Christmas Day. And I just loved it. I'm a huge fan of Pixar, and my favorite Pixar movies are the ones that aren't just a cool story with beautiful animation. They're the ones that try to say something. That it's a cliche. Everybody said this, but the thing that's great about Pixar is that they make animated movies that a child can enjoy for the adventure and the comedy, and an adult can appreciate for what they're actually saying in the film. And
it's what makes them timeless.
It's what makes them timeless. It's what makes them, in my opinion, the best Western animation studio, because their films mean something regardless of the age that you're watching them in. And they mean different things depending on the age that you're choosing to watch them. Okay, there are exceptions.
I'm joking.
They made a lot of movies. They can't all be amazing. But yeah, I think Soul is a film that starts out a little wonky, I'm gonna say. I think the very beginning of the film is brilliant because it's the story of Joe Gardner, this burnt out teacher. He's a sort of middle-aged black man who teaches in public school music. He's a jazz musician who he teaches music, but for him it's still a temp job. He doesn't want to teach. He wants to be a jazz musician, and he just never got his big break in life. And so he's sort of stuck because he doesn't want to teach. He doesn't want to get the stable job of teaching. He wants to be a musician professionally, but at the same time he's sort of in he's middle-aged. He's sort of he's stuck there. He can't choose exactly what he wants. Well, he knows what he wants, but he also knows that at some point that dream is going to fade because he's not going to have time to do it anymore.
Yeah.
But then something happens, and the bulk of the film is set in sort of an afterlife, before life, and it's about him as a spirit trying to, I won't exactly say what happens, although it is in the trailer, trying to get back to his life and basically have the big break that he never managed to have throughout the course of his life.
The trailer is only the first act.
Yeah, the trailer doesn't really say much about the film, and I think
the trailer
that's
does not reveal what this movie really is.
Yeah, I think that's really good. And yeah, the thing with the film the only thing that I didn't like, I thought the film until the last 20 minutes to a half hour doesn't really reveal what it's actually about. I think it's a great story. It's an entertaining story with some good, interesting messages, that very heartwarming messages. But it's only at the end that it really tells you what it's about.
And I actually really liked that they hit you with that message right at the end there.
It hits you at the end, and at some point there's a moment in the film where there's this big, impactful, climactic scene, and then the film continues. And it's in that continuation of the film that I think it becomes just perfect. And from there on out, it's, in my opinion, a masterpiece. And we were talking about it with my girlfriend because we've both seen it, and we were comparing it because it has similarities with Inside Out. It's the same director. We were saying how Inside Out resonated with me a bit more than it resonated with her. Well, Soul resonated more with her than Inside Out did, because the type of, sometimes everybody goes through stuff. The type of depression and sometimes anxiety that we both have is motivated by different things. Mm-hmm. And I think Inside Out tackles one type of depression, which is, let's say, apathy, I would say. And Soul tackles this idea that you feel purposeless in life, and you feel like, the next big thing that's going to happen is the thing that's going to make me feel good about my life. And this is what Soul is about. But it takes a while to get there. But when it gets there, it is just brilliant. I was crying like a child at the end. And also the voice performances, Jamie Foxx and Tina Fey, both brilliant. They do these characters fantastically. I can't even explain what Tina Fey's character is because that would be a spoiler. But it's a movie about finding purpose in life and whether having a singular purpose in life is even the point. And it's absolutely brilliant. That's it.
It is great. I love this movie also. It's one of my favorites of the year. I think I have it at number 6, but it's great. I think it's one of the best Pixar movies of the last... it's up there as a higher tier Pixar for me, more so than Onward, our respective Grizz. But yeah, I think this movie's amazing. I agree.
Well, today was a bad day for me in terms of getting the picture set up because I even forgot to put in the picture for my number 1 movie of the year.
That's okay.
But the number 1 movie for me of the year was The Trial of the Chicago 7, directed by Aaron Sorkin. Ooh. And that may be the reason alone why it's my favorite movie of the year. Because I love Aaron Sorkin. Every property that he has touched has been great to me. But even beyond all that, I'll keep it brief because we've gone on pretty long. But The Trial of Chicago 7, again, is a very poignant story for the time that we're in because it deals with racism. It deals with government overreach, police brutality, all these things that have been so relevant in 2020. And again, this movie has been in production for years prior, so it's another one of those serendipitous things. Like, wow, this really came out at the right time. The cast is incredible. I honestly think that Sacha Baron Cohen, this is the best performance that he will ever do. I mean, granted, he's a comedian, but like this, he's playing a comedian in this movie, but also a political activist, which is kind of what Sacha Baron Cohen is in a nutshell.
In real life, yeah. Pretty much.
Right.
It's casting on the level of Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. It's that good casting for him in this role. Yeah. But it's also got Eddie Redmayne, Mark Rylance, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Michael Keaton, Frank Langella, just great. Jeremy Strong. Great cast. Mm-hmm. And the writing itself, of course, is very Sorkin-esque, although I will say it is probably one of the least Sorkin-esque writing. It's not all banter. It's not all back and forth all the time. But it's still brilliant. It's intelligent, and it's fantastic. So that's my number one.
One thing Sorkin does really well, particularly in The Social Network and in The Social Network and Steve Jobs, and also in this movie, is cross-cutting between like the description of an event after the fact and also the event as it happens. And like he does that here with like protests clashing with the police and the trial discussing the protests clashing with police, and it's really, really, really effective and probably a highlight of that movie for me for sure.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Okay, unless Hugo has anything he would like to add, we can get Josh's number one.
I don't.
All right.
Okay. I just want to say that I think that movie is great too. I love Sorkin, and that'll probably get a bunch of supporting actor nominations. Yes. I would think. Come Oscar season.
Because they're all supporting actors, really.
Yeah, there wasn't one central main character.
And I'm not really big on Eddie Redmayne, but he was fantastic in that. So the fact that they could take an actor that I don't really care for and make him great.
The Oscars love him, by the way. So.
They do. Oscars love Eddie Redmayne.
He did. Yes, they do. Which is maybe part of why I don't care much for him, if I'm being completely honest. I shouldn't let that affect my opinion. Anyway, okay, my number one movie that I saw this year it's called Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. It premiered at Sundance and opened theatrically for like a minute before the world shut down in March. And it's currently available to stream on HBO Max in the United States, at least. It's written and directed by Eliza Hittman, wonderfully written and wonderfully directed. And it is about a 17-year-old girl named Autumn who lives in rural Pennsylvania who gets pregnant and goes to New York with her cousin to seek an abortion. And that's it. That's the whole movie. It is very procedural. Yeah. Like a lot of the movies, her like packing up her stuff and figuring out how to get train tickets and figuring out where to stay in New York and that kind of stuff. It's procedure over plot because it's a goal oriented movie where it's just here's what I have to do and this is what I have to do to get it done. It is. She encounters many roadblocks along the way, as you can imagine. That's kind of the whole point of the movie is how many roadblocks she encounters along the way. It's not very flashy. Like I said about Sound of Metal, it's almost documentary-like, even more so than Sound of Metal, really. Yeah. With the cinematography and the acting, it's very subdued. I realize this is a pretty hot-button issue for a lot of people in American politics, but it's not at all in your face about politics at all. Not just America, to be fair, but it is theoretically it's tangentially related to a hot button issue, but it's a pretty apolitical movie. It's just it's very muted and just kind of like this is what we have to do and this is what we have to do in order to do it. There was a movie 13 years ago out of Romania about the same thing. It's called 4 Months, 3 Weeks, 2 Days, and that takes place in Romania at a time when abortion was entirely outlawed, and in that movie, two women have to seek a completely illegal abortion. Yeah. Yes, as opposed to this movie where it's just like it's not illegal, but it's just kind of hard to do because the many roadblocks that people put in place. This movie borrows a lot from that Romanian movie. There's some visual homage and also some plot points. in both movies, again, this is the girl Autumn and her cousin Skylar who go to New York together, and they have to do certain things in order to get where they get and do what they do. And I won't spoil it, but it kind of mirrors some things that must be done in the Romanian movie as well. And it kind of, it captures some dark parallels. So you've seen both movies, Hugo?
No, I haven't, but I read, because it isn't available yet here, but I read reviews about Never Really, and yeah, really, well, not looking forward to seeing it because it sounds devastating. But,
right,
right. I do want to see
it certainly captures some sad realities about male-female interaction, and certainly some sad realities about being a woman in this country or in the world, really. It's very subtle. It's very brilliant. It's harrowing at times. The eponymous scene, so the scene where the title comes from, you can guess that the title comes from a medical questionnaire that she receives at Planned Parenthood. Have you ever XYZ, never really, sometimes always. That scene is absolutely devastating, probably the most devastating scene I've seen this year. The Autumn is played by Sydney Flanagan, a young actress who I've never seen anything else. She doesn't emote much. She plays her emotions pretty close to the chest for good reason that we eventually learn, but she kind of opens up more in that questionnaire scene, and again, it's devastating. And I think that the movie, subtly at first and then more overt as the story goes on, it just kind of shows how women's bodies are not their own. And again, it's subtle at first, and it gets more overt and more overt examples as you go on. And it's really brilliant. I think it's great. And I think that, again, it's a hot button political issue, and I get that, but it kind of shows the humans behind a political issue. You know what I mean? I think that politics so often just gets talked about in these ideas and not in realities, and it just kind of shows the reality and the people behind it and the consequences of certain, political ideas. And I think it's brilliant and subtle and devastating, and I really, really recommend it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you can confirm this, but I read a few reviews about it, and what they were saying was really brilliant about the film is that it sort of presents the situation, and there's no big speech, there's no big, well, maybe there is, but there's no big emotional scene that tells you what the themes of the film are, what it's trying to say.
No. It
just presents it, and the fact that there are so many roadblocks, that it's so complicated for a young woman to, get an abortion is the point.
If an alien came down and watched this movie, they would have no idea that this is about a political issue. Because it's a very apolitical movie. It's just a straightforward
statement of the situation.
It's a procedural movie.
Yeah.
Yes, it's a procedural thing. This is what we need to do, and this is what we need to do in order to get it done. And
which sort of drives the point home even stronger, because
yes,
it shouldn't be a political issue, and that's maybe the point of the film. I haven't seen it yet, of course, but
Well, so
I'll see it.
Even after seeing 450 movies in the last year, I still have a lot of homework to do.
Well, my homework is easier because I have a 12-minute movie to watch.
Yeah.
And this movie isn't very long. But...
All right. Well, let's wrap it up, guys. Any last thoughts?
No. I think
glad 2020 is over.
Yeah, I think we'll talk a bit more about 2020 next week. I don't know if we want to say already what our topic is,
next week we're going to be talking about our most anticipated movies for 2021, and of course a lot of those are going to be movies that we were anticipating in 2020, so I'm sure we will talk about 2020 some more next week as well. But our film to remember is going to be Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, which is on all the lists for potential Oscar nominations, we thought that would be a good pick. It's a movie that came out in 2020, but it's going to be really important that you watch it for 2021. So if you guys would please...
It's on Netflix.
And it is on Netflix, yeah. If everyone would please like, subscribe, share, comment, get the word out about us. We'd really appreciate that. I also would really appreciate comments. If you're watching, if you want to share what your favorite movie of 2020 was. I would love to read that.
Yes, reach out to us privately if you want.
Hopefully,
if you know us from Facebook, if you are friends from Facebook, give us feedback.
So we hope you'll join us again next week with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom and then our 2021 most anticipated movies. Until then, we will see you next time.